We live in a culture that treats silence like a technical malfunction. If a conversation pauses for more than a few seconds, someone rushes to repair it, as if a glitch has appeared in a social software. If a car rides grow quiet, we reach for a podcast. If we stand in line, we unlock our phones almost reflexively, not because there is something urgent waiting for us, but because the absence of input feels vaguely intolerable. Boredom has been eradicated, and we celebrate that as progress. But boredom once had a function. It was not an enemy. It was the dry, uncomfortable space where the mind, deprived of stimulation, was forced to generate its own material. Ideas emerged there. Unwelcome realizations surfaced there. Entire creative movements began in that friction. Now the friction is gone, or rather, it had been replaced by noise. The modern world runs on three interlocking forms of noise: physical, social, and digital. Each one reinforces the other. Each one slowly narrows the space in which a human being can simply think. The physical layer is obvious enough. Cities hum, engines drone, airplanes cross overhead with mechanical indifference. Even in the suburbs, the background soundtrack rarely drops below a low electrical buzz. Our nervous system were not designed for uninterrupted mechanical vibration. To a prehistorical brain, persistent noise meant danger, something approaching, something wrong, something that requires vigilance. When the noise never stops, vigilance never fully shuts down. Chronic exposure to environmental noise has been linked to elevated cortisol levels, increased blood pressure, cardiovascular strain. The body does not interpret constant stimulation as neutral. It interprets it as a problem, and so it prepares. But the physical layer is only the beginning. The social layer is subtler. Somewhere along the way, Western culture made a decision, not formally, but collectively. It decided that volume signals confidence, that charisma signals intelligence, that speed signals authority. The person who speaks quickly and confidently is assumed to know what they are talking about. The person who pauses is suspected of uncertainty. Meetings reward immediacy. Interviews reward performance. Open plan offices eliminate privacy under the banner of collaboration. The result is culture that privileges reaction over reflection. The performance of intelligence has replaced intelligence itself. Susan Cain, in her book Quiet, described what she called the extrovert ideal, the pervasive belief that the most socially dominant traits are the most evolutionary advanced. We have built institutions around this assumption. Schools push constant group work. Corporations design spaces that maximize visibility. Social hierarchies subtly elevate those who can occupy the most air. But there is no proven correlation between being the fastest talker in the room and having the best idea. In fact, research often suggests the opposite. Complex problems require depth. Depth requires uninterrupted thought. And uninterrupted thought requires quiet, something increasingly rare. When a society stigmatizes solitude, it slowly erodes its own capacity for complexity. So maybe needing quiet isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a signal. Maybe introversion, or simply the desire for depth, is not a defect. Maybe it's a natural response to an unnaturally loud world. When you step back from the noise, you start to see the system more clearly. There is an economy built entirely around your attention. Silence does not generate profit. Stillness does not create engagement metrics. Reflection does not feed algorithms. So the machine grows louder, not because it has something important to say, but because noise itself is the mechanism. And the louder it gets, the harder it becomes to notice how much of your life is being harvested. Yet even this is not the deepest layer. The most insidious noise is digital. It lives in our pockets. It sleeps beside us. It vibrates against our skin like a second pulse. It has successfully eliminated the final refuge of stillness, the unoccupied moment. Waiting for a water to boil, scroll. Stopped at a red light, check. 3 minutes before a meeting, refresh. The gap, the small space between stimulus and response, has been systematically compressed. And that gap matters. It is the location of judgment, of restraint, of imagination. Without it, we do not choose our reactions. We execute them. The digital environment thrives on fragmentation. Each notification is a micro-interruption, each headline a fragment, each outrage cycle an emotional spike. Our brains were not designed to context switch every few seconds, yet this is precisely what we now demand of them. We call it multitasking. It is not. It is rapid oscillation between shallow states. Cognitive switching costs accumulate invisibly. Attention thins, memory degrades, emotion regulation becomes fragile. We feel tired but not satisfied, informed but not grounded, connected but not understood. Minimalism in this context is often misunderstood as an aesthetic choice. Fewer objects, neutral colors, curated interiors. But the deeper form of minimalism is informational. It recognizes that information is no longer scarce. It is excessive, and excess, even when intangible, still burdens the mind. A polluted river does not cease to be polluted simply because the contaminants are invisible. The same applies to consciousness. There is also a psychological dimension to digital noise that extends beyond distraction. The feed is not neutral data. It is curated volatility. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Comparison spreads faster than contentment. The algorithm rewards emotional extremes because they sustain engagement. And so we are trained, subtly, persistently, to exist in a state of low-grade agitation. We are told that constant awareness equals responsibility, that to disengage is to be uninformed, that to miss a trend is to fall behind. But there is a distinction between awareness and saturation. Empathy does not require a real-time stream of every tragedy on Earth. In fact, cognitive overload produces paralysis rather than compassion. When the nervous system is perpetually overstimulated, it narrows its bandwidth. Subtlety is lost. Perspective shrinks. We become reactive citizens rather than thoughtful ones. And the irony is difficult to ignore. In a culture obsessed with connection, attention has become the rarest commodity. And yet we give it away freely. To applications, to notifications, to arguments we did not initiate and cannot resolve. Silence in such a context becomes subversive. To sit without input is to refuse participation in the attention economy. To turn off non-essential notifications is to assert that your cognitive resources are finite and valuable. To delay response is to reclaim agency over your own timing. None of this requires grand gestures. It begins with something smaller, almost invisible, lowering your resolution in the eyes of the world. We are conditioned to believe that being reachable at all times is a virtue. A delayed reply feels like negligence. A missed call feels like failure. Yet most of this urgency is manufactured. The majority of digital interruptions are not messages from people we love. They are prompts from systems designed to extract engagement. Turning them off is not antisocial, it is boundary setting. Another quiet practice is the intentional restoration of boredom. 30 minutes a day without productivity, without media, without optimization. No background audio, no secondary screen, just space. When I began to experimenting with small digital fasts, even just a day, the first hours felt uncomfortable. The mind resists. It searches for stimulation the way a smoker searches for a cigarette. There was a phantom limb sensation, a restless urge to reach something. But then something shifted. Reality sharpened. Light looked different. Time felt slower. Thoughts became less reactive. The static clears just enough for a signal to come through. My own thoughts. Not echoes, not responses, not borrowed opinions, just signal. This isn't about hating technology. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. Technology is not inherently corrosive. It has expanded knowledge, accelerated communication, and dissolved geographic barriers. But its incentives are misaligned with depth. It thrives on speed and visibility. Depth requires patience and invisibility. And so a choice presents itself, not between progress and regression, but between saturation and selectivity. Created ignorance is one response. The deliberate decision not to consume every available update. Not because you are indifferent, but because you recognize the limits of your nervous system. Resource management is not apathy, it is sustainability. There is also value in reclaiming the gap between stimulus and response, to delay commentary, to sit with discomfort, to resist the impulse to publicly process every reaction in real time. In that delay, thought matures. In that delay, ego quiets. In that delay, you begin to hear your own reasoning rather than the echo of 1,000 others. A culture that equates noise with vitality will interpret quiet as withdrawal. But there is a difference between withdrawal and discernment. One is avoidance, the other is selection. When the world accelerates, slowing down is not laziness, it is calibration. We are biological organisms navigating a technological landscape that evolves faster than our neural architecture. There is no shame in acknowledging this mismatch. The shame would be in pretending it does not exist. The modern environment will not grow quieter on its own. The economic incentives run in the opposite direction. If silence does not generate profit, it will not be promoted. Which means the quiet must be chosen. Not loudly, not performatively, but simply, consistently. There is a kind of strength in refusing to match the volume around you, in allowing pauses to remain pauses, in letting conversation breathe, in accepting that not every notification deserves entry into your mind. The aim is not isolation, it is coherence. Because without coherence, without an inner continuity of thought, life becomes a sequence of reactions. Efficient perhaps, but shallow. Depth requires space, and space requires subtraction. The world will continue to hum, screens will continue to glow, feeds will continue to scroll whether you participate or not. But beneath the vibration, beneath the commentary, beneath the permanent broadcast, there is still a quieter frequency available. It does not demand attention, it does not compete, it simply waits. And the more consistently you lower the volume, the easier it becomes to recognize. Not as absence, but as alignment. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next time, and until then, stay free and unique on your journey to your personal true north.